Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and this week is a little bit different. Usually, Mike Simmons is in Arizona when we talk. This week, he's in Tennessee. Mike, what are you up to?
I'm out here for a wedding, and timing just kind of worked out well where the folks over at Ambition, Brian over at Ambition, was able to meet up. They're in Chattanooga, the wedding's in Knoxville, and taking advantage of some travel out here to the southeast and getting some work done at the same time.
Well, wonderful. Give us an introduction of what is Ambition and who we're going to talk to.
Yeah, so I got connected up with Brian at Ambition through a member of his team, Jeremy. And Jeremy and I connected through Twitter. So again, using social, Twitter, LinkedIn. Jeremy found our podcast, liked the content that was out there, started looking into what Ambition does. And you know me, I like data. I like metrics. I like metrics that matter, metrics that make an impact on business success. And I think too often we kind of overwork this or overcomplicate many of these things. And Brian's done a lot of stuff when it comes to performance coaching and building out this business, and thought, what a great guest to have on the podcast. So Brian, thanks for doing that. And if you could share some background information with our audience, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks guys for having me. Thanks for coming to the office and enjoying Tennessee, beautiful Tennessee today. Yeah, the background of Ambition from a high level is we started out as a really simple platform that we wanted to encourage the right sales behaviors and build better culture. Over the last 3.5 years on this, I call it a journey, we've learned there's so much nuance to that. There's so much room to grow in broadly what I call the sales management software space. Every interaction between a rep, a manager, a sales leader, and how that's ultimately going to affect their performance. I by no means came into this space as an expert. I don't think my co-founders or anyone on our team were experts, but we're trying to learn a lot. We're trying to build the best product for leaders, for managers, and for reps. And it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, you guys are really doing some great things. And I think it's one of the places I'd like to kind of start with is the noise in this space. It seems like everybody is doing something adaptive. Everybody's doing something with AI. Everybody's doing something with machine learning. How much of it's real and how much of it's BS? And so tell me a little bit about how Ambition applies information to its customer base and what's real and what's not when it comes to this whole AI machine learning impact on data and sales.
Yeah, sorry to everyone in the audience who can see me rolling my eyes, but I'm going to be a little bit careful because I feel like I'm dragging on people recently too much. But pretty much, in my opinion, at this point, like 95% of the stuff that says AI next to it is BS. And, I think there are a lot of cool companies. I think that it's really easy to understand as a customer or as a buyer how the promise of AI can have a major impact for you. And I think that we're going to get there. So I think that we may just be seeing a little bit of the hype cycle before there's true value. What we like to say is that what most people are calling AI is like intermediate statistics. And it is, okay, let me take what has happened and based on what variables I have, I'm going to project forward. And that's really something different than AI telling me exactly when to call Mike. And, at 8:12, Mike normally answers his phone. That data is not normally real. And if you're basing your whole sales process on it or management cycle on it, I think you're in for some unfortunate situations. But what I do think is happening, and I'll kind of go back to there's a lot of noise in the space. I think that's awesome. Like we came into this probably too unprepared for how big the market was. And we knew about Salesforce, and we knew about some of these CRMs, and we knew about some of these other performance management tools like an Exactly or Calidus Cloud. But there's been a Cambrian explosion in terms of apps and tools and services and thought leaders and all of these different things out there. And part one is that tells me there's a lot of pains to be solved, which I think is a huge thing to not forget. We can get overly competitive with each other, but the reality is a lot of people are looking for help. Two is there may be limitless budget dollars. The great thing about selling to sales organizations is that as long as you are creating net positive ROI, there can be more budget. And we're seeing people really, really find that and expand that quickly. And, part three is that I think for a lot of startups, hopefully, we think about this a lot, is how are we going to positively impact people's lives? How are we going to make a net positive change in the ecosystem? And there's a lot to be done. I think that people in sales, people in especially inside sales and field sales and these various lead gen roles, that's a really hard job. So if we can, even in a slight way, improve their quality of life, improve the way they work or how they work, those are all really good things. But I think you're seeing a lot of stuff happening on the fringe of that, a lot of things that are happening that are real and also not real. And ultimately, that's okay. But I think, the cream will start to rise. I think we'll see category creation. We've seen this, not to get too deep into it, but, there was obviously the CRM category creation. Now there's segments throughout that market. There's the, the document tracking and interaction tracking space, kind of what used to be called sales enablement, which is far too broad of a word for that. You have the click to call and CTI integration space, the loosely what was Power Dialer. Now there are dozens of great companies that do that. Now you've got call recording space, you've got coaching space, you've got performance management space. So I think that you'll see a lot of those become really big categories. Maybe a couple of them will merge together, but I think you will see dozens of players that are having, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, if not at least tens of millions of dollars that are long-term, viable, strong companies overall.
Yeah, and you hit on a couple of really interesting ideas and thoughts and concepts in there. And one of them, the big one for me, is that pain. There's a reason why each of these companies keep cropping up. And there's a reason why many sales professionals and sales leaders and others inside an organization are interested in testing new technology, because they're trying to find, in some cases, a quick fix to try to fix this problem. And we've talked about this a couple of different times on different podcasts, but there are no silver bullets out there. So if you're looking for a silver bullet, you're not going to find it.
I love that you say that. Yeah, it's definitely true.
So tell me, when you get into these organizations and you find people who are doing things really well, what are they doing that makes them perform well? And then next we'll get into what are the ones that aren't performing well, doing poorly. And you can take that either way you want. Yeah,
well, I was thinking about it while I was rambling there for a second. But most of these things compete they're replacing Excel. And I think that whether it's like the CRM, 20 years ago, if you went into any sales org, the best sales guy had an Excel spreadsheet of everyone he was talking to and when the last time he talked to them was, and it was all crazy organized. And now they have Salesforce or whatever. So all of these things have replaced the manual activity that was, and hopefully made it more automated, more easy to use, more effective, and more productive as a person. But I think that kind of relates to the question you just asked, which is the folks that are doing it well. It doesn't matter, this kind of sells against ourselves, but it doesn't matter what tools they're using. They're great because they are training their reps effectively. They are managing them proactively. They are continually adjusting how they talk to their customer, what they hear on conversations, how they listen, how they display their value or how they communicate their value. And so I think that the best sales organizations is not the causation because they had great technology. That helps them. That hopefully is like a force multiplier for them because they're using an ambition or a outreach or someone, whoever, insert the cool company that you want to. Hopefully those are all force multipliers and make them more effective and more productive and better off. But I think it's really simple that they are doing the basics, and the basics probably were the same 25 years ago that they are now, which is they're hiring great people. They are training them effectively. They are managing them in a way that's not overly dogmatic or overly big brotherish, but they're actually, kind of enabling them to be very good reps. And then they reward and recognize and make those people feel excellent and develop them into the next thing those people want in their career. And I think the folks that are failing, no matter if they're spending $1 million a year on their sales stack or $0 a year on their sales stack, are are failing at that. And they're probably not listening to their customers. They're probably not hiring A+ reps, and they're probably not managing those people up to the best of their ability. And there's a lot of different places they can fall off in that spectrum. But I really do believe that it's not that there's like a silver bullet or even a couple of silver bullets that you have to put together. It's really about how they're managing their team and how they're running that team.
Yeah, a lot of what I heard there is culture, right? I mean, you got to build out this culture. And Jody, I know we've talked about this a couple of times before. Was it the Jack Welch quote around culture eats strategy for lunch, right? I mean, it's if you don't have the culture, you don't have a lot. You can continue to throw a bunch of cool tools at it. And there's so many different metaphors that you can roll in here. I could drive the latest Ferrari, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to be Michael Andretti around a racetrack in that car, even if he's driving a Mini Cooper. But so you get into this problem. And this problem is people continue to throw technology at the challenge. And many of them aren't taking a design approach. They're not saying, okay, what is it that I want the rep to do? What's that behavior that they should be doing? How do I work backwards from that? And then how do I put these technologies in place to actually enable that performance? And really interesting stuff. When you get into these instances where you start looking future focused, and we talked about how big the sales stack is, the number of clients that are out there inside, or not clients, excuse me, the number of technology providers that are out there that are to the number of things that can be in a sales stack. You talk a little bit about how at some point maybe there'll be some consolidation there. But before we get to consolidation, people have got to validate whether or not certain technologies fit. So can you talk a little bit about what you see in the future and kind of where you see maybe sales enablement, productivity improvement, all these other things kind of going? What does that look like 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to even predict, 2 years.
Sure.
2 years ago, I can't say that we would be sitting here, but I come back to the space is growing. I don't believe in or how would you put it? The rumors of the death of the salesperson, I think, are greatly over exaggerated. Yeah. In many ways, I think that ironically, I think people want to deal with great sales reps maybe more than ever. And they want that guidance and kind of personalized experience by a human. So I see a couple categories. I think that where data lives is ultimately a fundamental, foundational category. In many cases, that's Salesforce today. Obviously, there's the Oracles, Microsofts, Sugar, et cetera. How people work is kind of another category. I think that touches a lot of different workflows and a lot of different day-to-day functions of how people are doing that. And I think that probably gets fractured in a lot of different ways. Maybe there are a couple of different categories just in the how people go about doing their work. And then we see also a category that we think could be more valuable than all of those, which is why people do these things. And that's kind of where we talk about the performance management. Because not only is it, how effective are they? What's the spreadsheet tell me of the delta versus, this quarter versus last, but why are they doing it? What is happening to make them more effective or more happy or more motivated? So I think those are the three kind of like really broad horizontal sections. And I think there are going to be companies that only play in where does data live? What happens to it there? And there'll be companies that span all three. But yeah, I think that it's really hard to tell because, you go back to the question about AI and machine learning. Yep. Things will change. Things are going to change really quickly. I mean, how quickly did the automated email drip space change? 18, 24 months ago, that was the end all be all. And then everyone got it and everyone's reply rate, the open rate went through the floor. And so there are unintended consequences of being successful. And I think the good companies in that space quickly realize that, okay, we're more than just a good email drip tool. We are a workflow tool. And we're going to be, a better way for SDRs or AEs or whatever to do their job. And it's better than Salesforce. And so, that just is one example of a space where it changed so quickly that I didn't see that. Maybe I'm sure the founders of those companies saw that happening, but it's really hard to call because you don't know what happens at scale when everyone starts doing robo dials. And either you're getting tons of conversations or conversations cratered and now you have to do something else creative. So
my takeaway from that is that you've got to be creative. You've got to take the data that you have access to, the experience that you have, and then apply it in the context of the work that you do, adapt, iterate, change your approach, test. I mean, these are all common things that really get back to a concept that we talk about, which is sales is a thinking process. If you're focused on delivering templates and telling your sales team, this is how you need to do things, you've got to ask these specific questions. What you're doing is you're creating something that could be replaced by a machine, and you're not allowing them to get the information they need from the customer. You're not allowing them to put their creative stamp on it. So I'd like to, I know we've got just a couple minutes left here, but I'd like to transition into the behavioral aspect of things. So what is it about the behavioral aspect of how people or why people do things? What is it about that side of the equation that excites you or interests you? Like, why are you interested in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, even going back to what we were talking about before the podcast started, like, Tim Ferriss's podcast is phenomenal, and it has all of these great fitness things and how to like tweak, make your body a machine, how to make your mind, more effective. And I think that we're getting to a place where, 10 years ago, you didn't write down your like workout or your runs. And like now you use whatever cool app it is to do those things, Strava or what have you. So I think there's, this big shift that's happening around people being, maybe it's more used to being tracked. Maybe it's more enthusiastic about seeing their progress. And then I think that's very empowering. So I think the first step when I talk about tracking behavior or even evaluating people's behavior is that it should be net positive for them. It should be empowering for the person to be able to say, and I think that good sales reps used to do this 25 years ago again, but say, okay, here's how my commission plan works, or here's how my comp plan works. I'm going to backwards do the math and figure out if I want to make X, I need to do this Y, and Y is built up of X, and X is built up of so on and so forth. And you figure out this like chain. And from a rep's perspective, I hope that's freeing. I hope that that's freeing to say like, okay, now I understand the lay of the land. I have a map. I can progress myself through that map to be as successful or high performing as I want to be. And I really think that that's changing. I mean, Fitbit is the exact same concept. Like I'm going to go set, a goal for losing weight this month. I'm going to tie that to how many steps I take and how many times I stayed up and so on and so forth. And like now I have it in control. I have all the information to affect change. And I think that it excites me a ton because one, we're democratizing that data. It's not a conversation at the end of the quarter where my boss sits me down and says, hey, Brian, you missed the number. Surprise. That's unfortunate. Do better next quarter. Like hopefully I have the data on day 90, day 89, 88, and I can make those adjustments in real time. I can course correct myself, or I can work with my manager, my team lead, whomever, to be more effective and hopefully not have that shitty conversation at the end of the quarter. Because I've been that guy. I was that guy 8 years ago, and it sucks. And I think that's like really where it comes down to is like reactive rear view mirror management, I think has to go. I think it's one thing to say, here's what's happened, over the past, let's take a model and project that to the future. That's very useful. It's another thing to say, as most companies do right now, is like, we're only going to talk about performance at the end of the year or the end of the quarter or maybe the end of the month. And that's what really excites me, because once you give people that data and you give people insight to change their action, change their path, I think it makes a big impact and it gives people the power to, kind of control their own destiny.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you said in there that I think are really interesting, and I hope everybody gets this or this is resonating with everyone. But one piece is you're already dealing with a lot of different points of data that you have in your personal life. Whether I've got a Sunto watch, I keep track of all of my workouts, I've got all of that information. I can look at metrics on the things that are happening inside our company's Slack instance. There's all of this data that's out there. And for people who are in a sales enablement role, who are wondering about how do I get my organization more engaged in these tools, start putting them in the context of the things they use on a day-to-day basis. How many people inside your organization are engaged in Facebook because Facebook sends out common alerts about here's how to best use Facebook. I can't remember ever getting an email that says, here's how you should best use Facebook Twitter, same thing. I mean, there are these tools that are out there. So it's not that your people aren't engaged in the technology because they don't know how to use it. It's that you've not engaged with your people in the right way to get that technology adopted. Just as we wrap up here, Brian, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience, and including best ways to get in contact with Ambition or find out more about Ambition, see where you're at, and anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I'd love people to come to ambition.com. Super simple. I think that, really what I like to end on anything like this is that you don't need a product. Once again, you don't need a specific high budget to go change this. And I hope that you can go change it like next week. You can go have a conversation with your team or your managers or your reps and say, you know what, I'm going to try to be more proactive. I'm going to try to give you better insight to the data. Ambition is definitely here to help you do that and make you more effective and productive at accomplishing that change. But it doesn't have to be, I'm going to go spend money on an expensive tool or a bucket of tools, because ultimately sales is not, like you said earlier, it's not about having silver bullets. It's about, like Philadelphia 76ers, trusting the process. And you have to understand the process. You have to understand both where you're going, what's happening, and the conversion rates or the steps to get from point A to point B to point C to the, ultimately hopefully close dollars, contracts, and all the good stuff that comes with it. It's really as simple as that. Like, I think it's just like your workout example, like understanding the goal that you have, whether that's for an individual, your team, your groups, giving them the information of here's what we are doing. Here are the key exercises and activities that are going to help us accomplish the objective, whatever it is. And we're going to practice those and do those every single day, week, month, year. And if we do those in a structured, predictable way, we'll have a great outcome. Surely we're going to misstep and have mistakes or failures along the way. That's fine. We'll address those when they come up. We'll move on from it. We'll learn from it. And I think that if people get to that mindset, they'll have a much happier sales team, a much more engaged sales team, and it'll be much easier to coach and effectively improve their outcomes if you have that data and you have that type of relationship.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jody.
And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. If you want to find more episodes of the show or find out what we're up to, you can visit catalystsale.com.